So we finished season 4 of Buffy, the first season post-high school.
And the big thing at the start of this season was the gang starting college. There was going to be new college-related situations, and their characters were going to expand because of it. And that kind of happened for the first 2 episodes, but then that just stopped. And eventually we stopped seeing them go to class altogether, and the hangout spot defaulted from campus to Giles' house. Did they still pass college that year? Are they still going back to class next season, now that the initiative is done?
Good question.
And what about, I'm not done yet. And what about all of the people in the initiative who are masquerading as college students? And what about the frat house? Is anyone going to attempt to open the door of the frat house only to be greeted with a wall of concrete?
Yeah, this is all still happening in Sunnydale. So does that mean they're all kind of expecting weird stuff to happen already? Or would this be kind of throwing everybody off?
Wasn't there a college dorm that came alive and started eating people?
Yeah. Did that happen more than once?
The fact that we have to ask that question is ridiculous.
Yeah, but I agree. I was hoping that the show would feel a little bit more different because of the change from high school to college.
And it seemed like it was going to start that way, but then it backslid into not.
Yeah, and you still had basically all the same stuff when it comes to the characters that we've had before, with the same exaggerated melodrama, which was disappointing.
I would be interested to meet some of the college administration, because they had to be aware of something initiative related or have some kind of shadow agreement, I would think, even if they didn't know what the initiative was actually doing.
Yeah, Walsh died like a little over halfway through the season, I think, and we never got any kind of fallout from that on the school side of things.
Because when they were at high school, the principal was a big part of the stories, but in college, we didn't really see any of that. They could have had the dean be Principal Snyder's brother.
Still played by Armin Shimmerman. I would have gone for that. That would have been cool.
With a wig. All right, so let's talk about the initiative. It's a very slow introduction, people hiding in shadows, avoiding the public eye, until they didn't. And they ran through populated dorms with giant guns, and stopped staying in the shadows, and stopped concealing their identities altogether.
Yeah, very professional.
It was another instance of something appearing to be a legitimate threat until it's revealed that the threat is actually pretty incompetent.
And the season in general, when it comes to that whole story arc, didn't feel like they planned everything out to the extent that they should have. It feels like they had kind of the vague ideas of where it was going to go, but didn't figure out a satisfying conclusion for everything for when they actually got there.
Right. And even after the gang directly confronted the initiative took zero action and allowed them to keep doing whatever they wanted, including working against them.
Even after the gang said, well, we have to split up and hide and whatever because they're going to be coming after us, but nothing happened.
And they didn't split up and hide.
Well, they did for an episode.
One episode.
Or at least the end of the episode, yeah. And having Riley and Professor Walsh turn out to be directly involved with all that.
Yeah, Walsh was in charge.
Yeah, that could have been and should have been a big dramatic reveal. But instead it was just kind of like, oh, I guess that's what's happening.
And again, that whole college front of Walsh teaching a class and Riley being the grad assistant or whatever just got thrown away after they hung out in the initiative basement for a while.
Yeah, it feels like a lot of missed opportunity all around. I think of when Buffy joined the initiative and it lasted only 1 episode. They could have done a lot with that. They could have done a lot to explore the relationships between everybody. They could have done a lot more to build things up that way. And especially when it comes to Adam, they needed a lot more development to everything to make it really pay off eventually, and they didn't do that.
Let's talk about Adam. So when he woke up, he had this whole, I just want to know who I am and what the purpose of everything is. But then that was suddenly not the case, and he just wanted to kill everybody.
Yeah, even by the end of the season, I was a little bit vague on his entire motivation or point to anything. And they gave him so many speeches, so you would think we would have a good feel for what he's really trying to do and why, but we don't.
Plus, he had that ability to not be affected by alternate realities, which was caused by magic. And why was that? Did Walsh know about magic? Was that part of Adam's design, or did she develop him that way by accident?
I think it was just supposed to be the demon parts of him, but there are demons everywhere, so there should be a lot of other demons that were unaffected too, I would think.
Right.
And they clearly stuck that in as just a way of saying, hey, look at how dangerous Adam is. Look at how powerful he is. But again, that never really came across because he never does anything with his supposed potential, with his supposed strength or anything. He's just basically unbeatable in a hand-to-hand fight, which again, why don't they just shoot him then?
And despite being the biggest threat the gang has faced so far, he's not around actually doing things until the end of the season. And most of the time, none of the gang, even the smart ones, address the fact that Adam is not doing anything. And after we find out what his plan actually is, it's clear that it wouldn't take 10 episodes to have done what he was actually aiming to do.
Oh, yeah. And those episodes, they spend so much time saying, we have to be ready for Adam and we have to prepare and whatever. But even on their end, they don't really do a whole lot.
And I'm going to point out that there are episodes where they don't even talk about him. So that only happens sometimes.
Yeah.
Adam is the biggest threat we have. Hey guys, I'm making a Thanksgiving dinner.
And that episode was still better than most of the other ones. Actually, I don't think Adam had been introduced yet at that point, but the point still stands. And of course, the conclusion to all of that really felt like a huge letdown, both in terms of scale, even though they tried to make things feel big. For me, it didn't come across. It wasn't effective.
And even before that whole culmination of Adam, smack dab in the middle of it, we had Faith show up.
The entire, I guess you could say, structure of the season felt like it was consistently trying to undermine its main storyline when it comes to the threat.
Despite telling us that the threat is a huge threat.
And it makes me wonder why they did it that way, if they just didn't think things through and kept coming up with other ideas and saying, let's do this here, or if they realized that Adam wasn't as effective of a kind of main villain as they thought it was going to be.
But it's their fault. They could have developed him differently or more.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. If it's not working, do an episode where they address that and turn him into that big threat. But instead they just kind of put it off.
Or where they realize it's not working and just get rid of him.
Yeah, which brings up Walsh, because she was a big part of it for a while, and she was actually an interesting character, and definitely the actress was better than most of the actors in the show, but then she just kind of died.
I wish she had had more interactions with everyone else.
And I know that supposedly the actress wasn't available for some of it, but they still should have taken that into account when they, planned out the season or were writing these episodes.
And it's not like she couldn't have interacted with them. I remember that conversation between her and Giles. That was really good.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that was the only time they ever interacted. That was a scene that relied on the characters, and the characters being strong enough to have that conversation with each other, and the actors portraying them being strong enough to make it effective. But pretty much everything after that, when it comes to that main storyline, is just, we have to stop Adam. He's a big threat. Just the same thing over and over again, without any real character involvement in any kind of way. And of course, the rest of the characters are not that strong of characters.
And character growth this season, there was some, but I wish there had been more. It seemed like at the beginning of the season, everyone was really going to expand in different directions, apart from Buffy, the main character. Giles was going to have to redefine himself now that the gang wasn't in high school. He wouldn't just be the guy who knows everything with the books in the library. He has Olivia show up a few times. He started to get drunk a lot. He sang a bunch of songs. But eventually he became the guy who knows everything with the books in his house.
And I think of the Yoko factor, where Spike specifically points out kind of the ruts that all the characters are in, but then it's just kind of resolved immediately and everything goes back to exactly what it was before.
Yeah, like Xander at the beginning had a crisis of character. He didn't go to college with everyone else. He was going to have to figure out who he was and what he was going to do with his life. But then he just stuck around in the basement the entire season. He got a job as an ice cream man. Okay. And his relationship with Anya hit some rough spots, which was good for their relationship, except they kept hitting the same rough spots over and over and then resolving them, but then going back to them.
Yeah, it felt like they didn't know what to do with Xander, and they tried to make the fact that they didn't know what to do with him part of his storyline, but that means it's not going anywhere.
And Anya, too, became pretty stagnant, just making social etiquette jokes and serving as mild comic relief.
Which is why I don't mind it with her, because she is more of a character off on the side, and I think she works better just sticking in those comic things.
Yeah, but she had that good conversation with Spike, And I thought that was going to be more of a thing.
Yeah, I mean, there are moments in the season and in the show in general where they'll have little character things like that that could go somewhere, but it feels like they drop it immediately, or whatever the issue is that they're dealing with gets resolved by the end of the episode, but then in the next episode it's like it never happened in the first place.
It's like, do the writers realize as they're writing it, hey, this is actually good, or does it just happen by accident?
Yeah, it doesn't feel like they have a coherent grasp on how to handle the show still, even though this is 4 seasons in. And that goes too for the way humor is used, because I think of early on when the humor was very inappropriate for the scenes, but it felt like they were desperate to try to make it funny and scary at the same time. But now it feels like they've pretty much done away with the scary, and instead it was almost more of like it was trying to be like an action thriller show or something like that, because Adam's not exactly a scary character, even if he's a big threat.
I want to talk a little bit more about the humor. I think they got a better handle on it this season overall, and there was a big turn towards physical comedy, which I was okay with.
Yeah, I definitely think they've improved a lot in that entire area.
But the show still has a tough time of balancing multiple plots and threads, and they try and use humor a lot of the time to, distract us that things aren't cohesive.
Yeah, I think the character stuff and the overall plot stuff is what they really need to work on.
And there's more plots going on at the same time, which is a good thing, but you have to be able to keep track of all of that if you're going to do that.
Yeah, and you have to be able to move between them in an effective way. Again, with Adam being in the background for so much of it, that didn't really work.
So hopefully that continues to improve as we get into season 5.
When it comes to the humor, there were more episodes this season that were humor-focused. And I do think those episodes tend to be the best in general, or they at least stand out as being better than a typical episode.
But those also tend to be the episodes that have nothing to do with the overall season arc.
Yeah, which I think says a lot, unfortunately.
Something that has not changed in this show is a character holding on to some piece of critical information and not telling everybody else, despite the immense benefits doing so would provide.
Oh, man. Yeah, it just feels like another way for them to drag things out.
And they have all of these meetings all of the time, specifically to discuss supernatural and main plot-related events. It's not like they don't have the opportunity to bring it up. They just actively choose not to, and then they get defensive when they're called out on it.
And it just makes me keep thinking that they have those meetings, and instead of being proactive and thinking ahead, it almost feels like they're just kind of saying, let's get this immediate problem out of the way so we can stop thinking about everything again and just go back to having fun or whatever.
Or even pushing the immediate problem off to the side because I, as a single character, have some dumb personal thing I'm dealing with that really should be negated by all of the important things going on, but I'm not going to let it.
Yeah, which I haven't talked about the comics at all on these videos, but the comics that were coming out during season 4 were focused a lot more on the plots, and it actually made the characters feel a lot smarter and a lot more responsible because they weren't dealing with their personal stuff as much. And I'm not saying the comics were great, but it's an interesting thing to kind of see the difference between the show and the comics.
And I think the biggest offender is Buffy. She dragged everybody backwards, and if the stuff with Adam and the Initiative had not picked up, none of these characters would have had any opportunity to grow because of Buffy. I think it was right at the beginning of the season where Willow actually said out loud, she told everybody, they need to stop growing and expanding because Buffy is sad and they need to let her reel the rest of them back in.
Yeah, and the fact that Buffy is the main character and she's the Slayer, you know, she's the one with all this responsibility. And sometimes she, since the start of the show, she's complained about her responsibilities and whatever, and that it's too much and blah, blah, blah. But she doesn't actually deal with it most of the time. She puts it off to the side.
The only time I can think of in this season where she actively told everyone they need to shape up was when Faith came back.
Yeah, not even the main threat of the season, but just a side thing that was forgotten about as soon as those episodes were over. So the last time we saw Faith was during the conclusion of the whole mayor thing, when she was in a coma.
She fell asleep in that truck.
So having her come back and not realize how much time had gone by could have been interesting, but they kind of blew that off immediately and just turned it into kind of a pretty generic, it's Faith and we have to stop her storyline.
And then also deciding to throw in the Watchers Council out of nowhere.
Yeah, who we haven't heard anything of in forever.
And after this little arc of Faith was over, they disappeared again.
Which, again, makes me wonder, they're called the Watchers Council. They're the Watchers. They're supposed to be working with the Slayers, but they don't have any involvement with either Buffy or Faith at this point. So what are they doing?
Maybe somebody was accidentally reading some Marvel comics and said, well, the Watchers can't actually do anything.
Okay, I was wondering where you were going with that. That makes sense. And that's another element of the world of the show that I feel like has a lot of potential that has never been really developed or explored. It feels like they have ideas for things, and they put the ideas in the show before they've thought them out. So they end up just kind of being there and not really doing anything.
It's like you're drafting and making the final copy at the same time. Your draft is the final copy.
Yeah.
And what was the conclusion with Faith? I don't even remember. She transferred bodies, and then they transferred back.
I forgot all about that, yeah.
Then they transferred back at the end, and then what happened to her? Did they take her away? Did she die? Is she now an angel?
Oh, yeah, well, she had her kind of crisis of conscience little subplot, which wasn't really convincing, but it was something. And then she just kind of left at the end, I think. And I know she shows up in Angel, so maybe they do something better with her there. I don't know. But what they did with her here wasn't really as effective as I think they thought it was.
What a strong character that we can't even remember what happened to her.
Yeah.
Speaking of character arcs, I think the most disappointing one for me this season was Spike.
Yes, I completely agree.
More Spike is good, but his character was completely different than in previous seasons. He came in as such a threat. He was serious. He was able to both draft and execute plans that caused pain and strife for everyone. But now, he is just comic relief. And it wasn't just because he has the chip in his head. He could have still schemed and been a threat without physically hurting people. His chip was the excuse to get him close to the gang physically and explained why he couldn't hurt them. But there was no reason for them not to kill Spike. And they let him deceive and betray them over and over again. And he's a schemer, and he's smart. Well, he was.
Yeah.
Having him follow Adam's directions to the letter, and assuming that Adam isn't also a schemer and will possibly not follow through on his end of the deal, never seems to occur to Spike. It seems like Spike should say, yes, Adam, I'll work with you, but I'll have my own motives and secret plans happening at the same time. But he doesn't.
Yeah, it all serves to just undermine him as a character, to make him go from being smart and everything to now seeming like almost, I mean, given that he is essentially comic relief at this point, it makes him feel just very buffoonish and stupid. And like you said, it wasn't because of the chip. When the chip was introduced, that was a way, and they kind of did this at first, to give Spike kind of his own little character arc of some kind, have him have something that he's dealing with. But basically, once he found out that he could fight other demons or whatever, it seemed like they said, oh, I guess that's the end. And I don't know if it's because they couldn't think of anything else, or I don't know, but nothing else happened with him.
That seems to be a recurring motif of this season. Them saying, we can't think of anything else, and then that's it.
Yeah, but the characters are still there. And again, Spike being around all the time makes no sense. And he doesn't add anything other than some humor. And despite all that, I still think he's a relative highlight of the show.
Yeah, me too.
Despite all those problems. Which I think just shows how much better the humor is than the actual storylines and characters. But it's not primarily a comedic show. Obviously, the humor is an element of the show, but it feels like it's trying to be more of a character thing, especially with all the melodrama. And with so much emphasis on, especially Adam in this season, it feels like it's trying to have stronger storylines, but it doesn't.
And we're still pushing in that direction because we saw in the last episode, the whole thing with the first Slayer. Is that going to turn into another Adam situation?
Yeah, I worry that a lot of times what happens with shows like this, or this happens a lot in comics and stuff, you'll have your big threat that the characters eventually defeat, and what the writers end up feeling like they have to do is try to top that by just having a bigger threat, a more powerful adversary every time, and it becomes boring if they do that, because it's just the same thing over and over again, but more powerful.
Yeah, the Dragon Ball Z syndrome.
Yeah, that's a perfect example. So I really hope they don't do that.
So Spike was most disappointing character arc, but the best character arc for me this season was Willow.
Which you also said last season.
I had a lot of hope in the beginning of the season. She immediately started expanding as a character, but then it was like the writers realized what they were doing, and they yanked her back and said, let's make her Buffy's roommate, because we can't have decent character growth on this show.
I mean, I probably agree with you about that, about her being the strongest character when it comes to that kind of thing. but it felt like a lot of it, to me, was kind of stuff coming in from the outside.
Yeah, I mean, she explored a lot more magic stuff. She went through losing, gaining, and then losing Oz again. And then she had Tara enter the picture. But the writers still treat all of that like it's a Willow spin-off series within the main series.
Yeah, especially with the way Willow was hiding Tara, which still, again, was never really explained.
And why Tara was not part of the Adam plan at the end of the season doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, especially since she is the other person that has magic knowledge and experience when their entire plan relied on magic.
And she never asked Willow after the fact, why didn't you ask me for help? Because I assume Willow told her everything that happened.
Yeah, well, I don't think we actually saw Tara again after that. She was in the dreams, but I don't think she was in an actual episode. Yeah, she wasn't, because we just saw the gang at the beginning of the last episode kind of hanging out, and that was it.
You know what they should have done? They should have had them fighting at him and, his arm turning into CGI guns and whatever. And then
they should have done that? That's how you're going to start out?
And then intersperse clips of Tara just playing with the cat. Saying, I wonder where everyone is.
As you're saying that, it makes me wonder if they're going to do something with the cat later where it'll turn out it's not a cat. It's some kind of demon or something, and that'll be a way for them to write the cat out of the show, because dealing with animals is hard.
Maybe they should have the cat eat Amy.
But since it's magic, maybe she'll turn into the cat then. Something like that.
When they eventually manage to turn Amy back to a human, she'll be a cat-human hybrid.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
No, it's not.
I was thinking from the writer's perspective.
But the fact that we don't actually know everything about Tara, it seems like there's still some things hidden, and I hope they address it, because we've just pointed out that a lot of times they drop stuff. That would be a character arc spread over multiple seasons, which we don't usually see.
Yeah, I mean, I will say that the show overall, compared to the earlier seasons, it does feel like, even if it doesn't always work, it feels like they at least have some kind of idea of where things are going. And clearly we saw that with the last episode, which seemed to be a lot of forecasting of things to come.
And I will say that Tara in particular, her introduction and integration felt more organic than pretty much any character we've seen so far.
Yeah, and I would also say, for me personally, I think she's a much more likable character than the main cast, even if she doesn't really do a whole lot. I think she's the only one that hasn't had some kind of dumb subplot about her insecurities or whatever. And that's a part of her character, but they made it work.
Yeah, because she is a very insecure character.
Yeah, but not in a stupid way.
Well, I'm banking on season 5, rectifying that. It's going to turn out she's a goblin or something.
Oh, man.
Or she's not real somehow.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Oz left. It was odd that the first Oz-centric episode of this entire show is also the one where he left the show. And I wonder if he had stuck around, would his character have grown, or would he have fallen into the same trap as the rest of them, which is more likely.
Yeah, I think he was already kind of falling into the same trap, because earlier on he felt like he was a bit more distinct in terms of his personality, but as it went on he was just kind of there for a lot of it.
Because he would have been another character that wasn't in college with the rest of them.
And I know that the reason in real life that they wrote him out was because Seth Green wanted to go off and do other things.
Better than this show?
But in the show, I mean, he's a werewolf, and it felt like the kind of thing where they were like, oh, we have to deal with that again. Because it hardly ever came up. But whenever it did come up, it was like, oh, we have to do a werewolf episode here. And I feel like they could have handled that a lot better. It again, I said this before, but it makes me wonder why they introduced the element of having one of the main cast be a werewolf if they weren't going to do anything with it.
Maybe Tara's thing will be she's also a werewolf, but has managed to keep it hidden until now.
And the episode where Oz returned, it felt like, I mean, when it starts out, it's Oz has gotten a hang of everything and gotten more control over himself. But as the episode goes on, he loses control pretty much immediately. So apparently all that traveling in the Himalayas or whatever wasn't as effective as it was supposed to be.
Yeah, all it takes to unravel that entire thing is seeing his girlfriend.
Yeah, who he broke up with in the first place.
And abandoned.
Yeah.
Speaking of abandoning things, one of the things that annoyed me the most out of this whole season was the high school. It was, no, hear me out. It was destroyed, it was burned out, it was blown up. Nobody ever cleaned it up. They didn't raise the rest of it. And that meant that the Hellmouth was just sitting there. And I assume it's sitting there even now in season 5. It was weird, one, that Adam didn't incorporate any of that into his plans. It seemed like that would have made sense. And two, the initiative didn't do anything to contain or even monitor it. And let's say maybe they didn't know about it, but then Riley had a big old battle right next to it, and there was earthquakes and all kinds of shit going on. And even after that fact, he didn't say, yo, initiative, there's like a big Hellmouth just sitting here.
Yeah, that episode was about demons trying to do something with the Hellmouth, and it was just 3 demons that were pretty easy to fight, which means apparently anybody could go to the Hellmouth and just perform some kind of ritual and basically end the world because nobody's watching over it.
And it wasn't even really that much of a ritual. They just jumped in.
I would think even just things would be trying to come out of the Hellmouth. Isn't that kind of what was happening already in the earlier seasons?
Yes.
And now it's just there.
And the things coming out was just based on dates. It was like, oh, it's February 18th. This demon's going to pop out of the Hellmouth. We better get ready.
You would think he would mark his calendar or something.
And then there was that episode with Ethan, where Giles found that a demon was going to jump out not of the Hellmouth, but of some crypt. So it seems like that's a regular thing, where based on the date, demons are going to pop up in certain places.
Yeah, again, you would think they have the knowledge of that. They would be prepared, but instead it always kind of is like, oh shit, I forgot about that. We got to go deal with that.
As I was feather dusting my bookcase, I just happened to remember that today's the day.
And speaking of Ethan Rayne, my favorite antagonist from the earlier seasons, I'm still not sure what his whole deal is or what he's trying to do. I know he wanted to kill Giles or whatever, but he didn't. And why did he leave? I don't remember.
Well, the initiative took him away.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. So does the initiative have him? Is something going to come of that? Because that could be interesting.
They should have done a final shot of him in a cell, and it would be completely abandoned all around him. And he would have been like, hey, is anybody out there? And then there would have been a spout that just starts spitting out concrete in his cell. Yeah.
That's what I was imagining too. Because I could see they could have done something where, since he's been captured by them now, and we know the kind of Weasley guy that he is, that he could say, hey, if you guys let me go, I'll tell you all about this magic stuff or whatever, because he has knowledge of that, or demons and stuff like that. And then that could give the initiative a way to use magic against, for their own purposes.
Yeah, so let's touch on that for a second.
Yeah.
Were they aware of magic? Did they not believe in magic? What was their thought process on all that?
That's a good question, because they know about all the demons and everything, and they have all this gear. That's what their entire point is fighting the demons and everything, but they seem so oblivious of so much of that.
Like, I get that they're like, technology is king and we have weapons, but are they so obtuse that they just deny the existence of magic?
That's what it seemed like. And I get that we're not supposed to like them, and, they're supposed to seem like... I mean, part of it was them dismissing Buffy because Buffy's just a dumb girl or whatever, but she knows more than they know about them.
Well, I don't like them.
Yeah, but it wasn't plausible in the show that they would be doing everything that they're doing, yet be so in the dark about so much of it.
Yeah. And Riley. We haven't talked about Riley yet. Let's do that.
Oh, okay. I was hoping we could get around that, but okay.
Him being so high up in the initiative...
was laughable. I'm going to say that first.
Based on all of his actions and thoughts and dialogue and existence. His integration into the gang was very awkward, which is not new. Most characters are, except for Tara, like we said before. And it really annoyed me at the beginning that he and Buffy acted like they were 12 years old, and it went on for way too long.
Yeah, I agree. And Riley, just as a person and as a character and everything, there's just not a whole lot to him. It felt like his entire character was dependent on the fact that he was part of the initiative and that he was dating Buffy, but he wasn't a strong character on his own.
Right. And despite both of them vowing to be totally open and honest with each other, they both dodged the truth and held things back pretty regularly.
Which is expected, unfortunately, but that doesn't mean that it's acceptable.
Although I assume at some point, some honesty was dropped when Buffy told Riley that his initial haircut was ridiculous.
So I guess he did improve a little bit as the show went on.
And once the two of them were together, Buffy still had to find reasons for drama, even though Riley himself pointed out, things are great between us right now. And she said, yeah, you're right, and it really bothers me.
Oh, yeah, that was probably the most irritating thing, other than the way they kind of dropped the ball on the whole Adam thing. That was the most irritating thing about the season.
And when her drama well went dry and she couldn't find anything else to bring in, whoop, here's Angel He's just back for no reason other than to stir the pot before sauntering back to his own show.
Oh, man. Yeah, that was incredibly irritating.
Yeah, I even like how they had Angel show up, and he said, "Is there anything I can do to help?" And it was right in the midst of them battling Adam and everything. And Buffy goes, "No."
Yeah. It's just too bad that Riley didn't die in the big battle at the end. Somehow he defeated zombie idiot number 1 after being injured and held in a paralysis thing for so long and whatever.
Yanking out his own heart.
Yeah. And it felt like when he and Buffy first became a thing and first found out about each other, about who they each really were, they tried to explore the fact that they're kind of a match for each other in terms of, the fact that they can both fight and everything. But then that whole angle just kind of was forgotten about. I feel like that could have been interesting. And they do go out and fight together, but it feels like Riley's just another one of the gang at that point.
Yeah.
So that was disappointing.
I enjoyed watching this show more than previous seasons, but not until we got 7 or 8 episodes in. The early ones were quite a slog.
I agree. And again, I think most of the best episodes were the standalone episodes.
Yeah.
I feel like there were more standalone episodes in this season than earlier ones, I think.
That might be true, but it might just feel that way because they didn't talk about Adam or the initiative as much as they should have.
Yeah, that's true.
My last note is there was a significant lack of Joyce throughout this season.
Yeah, which was very disappointing. The earlier seasons did feel like they were doing something with her eventually once she found out about Buffy, but they kind of made her even back into kind of the idiot that she was earlier on, when she just kind of brushes everything off when they say that they were almost killed in their sleep in the last episode.
And the excuse in the earlier episodes was she didn't know who Buffy really was and what she was actually doing. But then she found out, and you'd think, well, she's going to be more involved now. But then they said, oh, well, now Buffy's at college, so she's not going to be able to keep in touch. Why not? It's in the same freaking town. It's probably next door.
And they have phones. One character we didn't talk about was Parker.
That was on purpose.
So Parker was the love interest early in the season, and of course he turned out not to be what Buffy was hoping. I can see what the writers tried to do, although I don't know if they knew what they were doing at the time, or if they kind of later on said, oh, let's turn it into this. It was supposed to be like a learning experience for Buffy, and I don't know, don't jump into things and whatever. But it ended up not mattering at all. It was just kind of a thing that happened.
I was surprised he showed up in 3 separate episodes.
It makes me think of Scott back in season 3. I mean, it was kind of the same thing again. It was just like, we need a generic love interest since Angel's not here. So let's just do it, and then it's done. And that's it.
So who's going to be that character in season 5?
Yeah. I mean, it is interesting that Buffy is with Riley now, and I don't mean interesting in the sense that I'm riveted. I just mean, like, I'm kind of surprised that now that Angel's out of the picture, that she's with Riley, and at the end of the season, things seem to be good between them. I'm surprised they didn't set something up like that, where, they were going to have trouble or whatever.
There's 2 options in season 5. 1, Ethan Rayne uses magic to become younger and seduces Buffy, and she doesn't realize it. Or 2, Airplane Kid is now grown up and seduces Buffy, and she doesn't realize who he is.
I could go for either one of those.
Until she walks into his bedroom, and there's just posters of airplanes, and there's models of airplanes everywhere.
See, what they could do to mine the true comedic potential is have both of those plots happen at the same time. So they're both fighting over Buffy, but they don't realize it. Oh, that could be so good. I can't wait for season 5 now.
It's too bad that we weren't around back then.
To give them such good ideas.
Yeah. All right, so what was your least favorite episode? We'll hit these first, and then we'll talk about our favorite episodes.
I think I'm going to have to go with Beer Bad, which I know is a lot of people's least favorite episode of the show. I think we said in that episode that it wasn't as bad as some earlier ones.
Right.
But it was just really dumb. And knowing what the writers were trying to do, to get that money, doesn't excuse it. It explains it at least, but, I mean, they still did the episode, and it still played out the way it did. And it was dumb. What was your least favorite episode of the season?
The Freshman.
Really?
All because of Buffy, the main character of the show, taking an episode that promises us things that have endless room for expansion in a fresh new season with new friends, new enemies, new locations, new stories, and actively and forcibly dragging both us as viewers and the characters backwards to prevent all of those things from actually happening pissed me off so much. And no, by the end of the episode, she did not realize that maybe she was in error because she continued to do the same shit for a bunch more episodes. For the show to say, it's time to get better, and the main character of the show to say no is asinine.
Yeah, I agree.
So what was your favorite episode?
I would have to go with Restless.
Oh, I was afraid you were going to say The Freshman.
Even though I did like some of those other standalone episodes like Superstar and Hush, and even though this episode, I guess this episode did have a decent amount of humor in it, but it's not the same kind of humor as the rest of the show, and I do like a lot of the humor in episodes like Superstar, but this episode was shot so much more interestingly, everything was presented so much more interestingly. It didn't feel like empty entertainment as much. It felt like there was more to it, and I really appreciated that. And I think it stands out of the entire show up to this point.
I would definitely agree. But because it's so different, it felt so separated from the rest of the season. I almost consider it not part of the season.
Yeah, it was definitely interesting that they decided to end the season with, another episode after the conclusion of the main storyline.
Yeah.
And I will say I wasn't a huge fan of the threat in that episode, mostly because they just kind of forgot about it at the end. It was just like, oh, I guess we defeated it, whatever. But the rest of it worked so well.
I think within this season, my favorite episode would be Hush. And like you said before, I think the best episodes in the season were the standalone ones, and not even all of them. I think the most creative episode was Superstar, again, outside of Restless.
And I was really impressed with how far they went with Superstar in terms of production design and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, who would have thought if you put in real effort, it turns out well?
If only they could have done that with Adam.
Yeah. Who was your least favorite antagonist?
Definitely Adam. I wasn't a fan of Parker. I wasn't a fan of Faith. At least with Faith, they tried to do something with her. It didn't work, and I still think she's really dumb. She's not dumb in concept, but as in execution, it just doesn't work. But Adam, there was nothing interesting about Adam at all. I guess the concept could have been interesting if they had done more with the demon side of things, or had given him more developed motivations and a better plan at the end. But it really felt like they kind of said, oh, we got to have something here. And they literally just cobbled him together and said, that's Adam. I guess that's what it's going to be. And even the Frankenstein side of things could have been explored a bit more, which, again, they did at the beginning when he first showed up and was talking about, all his philosophical ideas. But then later, even though he has his speeches, he doesn't really say anything in those speeches.
And going back to Faith, I know I said it at the time, but it would have been much better for her if the weapon the mayor had given her was just a bomb.
I mean, it would have made more sense. I think it was a good idea to do something involving magic, but the fact that it was just body swapping with Buffy is such a, ridiculous thing.
Such an easy way out.
And it's such a relatively minor thing. I mean, body swapping with somebody, you're still two separate people. It's not like it kills Buffy or, it doesn't really do anything. It's not a weapon really. It's just a tool.
Right.
So who was your least favorite antagonist?
I'm going a little off the beaten path here, and you probably don't even remember her, but I'm going to say Sunday. I hated everything about her. The way she acted, the way she looked, the things she said.
The fact that her name was Sunday.
Ah.
See, I thought you were going to say, what was Buffy's roommate's name? Was it Karen?
Kathy.
Kathy. Yeah, I thought you were going to say Kathy.
No, because she got her face ripped off. That was kind of cool.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, in retrospect, I'm not surprised that you went with Sunday. But I'm still kind of surprised that you chose Sunday over Adam.
Well, Adam, like you said, was very bland and didn't really do anything. But I didn't hate him because of that. I hated that he was supposed to be the biggest threat, but didn't actually do anything. But I actually hated Sunday.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
So who was your favorite antagonist?
The beer in Beer Bad. No, I almost want to say Walsh, just because I liked her performance, I liked the actress, but the way she was written didn't really make sense in that last episode where she was kind of trying to scheme against Buffy. So I'm going to have to go with the gentleman from Hush. It felt like the one time this season that they actually tried to have creepy characters, creepy monsters, and I thought they were pretty effective.
And I like how they popped up out of nowhere. It was in no way related to anything else that was going on.
So who was your favorite antagonist this season?
This is tough because they're also the most disappointing antagonist for me. I'm going to say Spike. I'm not going to rehash too much on the points we already made, but it really bothered me that he was so different. But he was also engaging when he was on screen. Like, I wanted to see what he was going to do, even though most of the time it was really dumb. And I'm hoping, I don't have high hopes, but it would be nice if he became a legitimate threat again and realized that he's now a joke.
I agree. It seems like there should be ways for him to get that chip out of his head, but he doesn't seem to even be trying to do anything.
So he can hurt demons and stuff, which means he could hurt himself. And we saw Riley just dig into his chest to pull his chip out. Why can't Spike do the same thing? Doesn't he have vampire healing powers or something?
Yeah, I mean, it shouldn't kill him.
Couldn't he ask another demon to do it for him?
Well, yeah, that's what I was thinking. I mean, he lives in this whole magical world and everything. If Buffy could pull Adam's power source out or whatever, thinking of how she was, making it disappear in the air and everything, why couldn't he have some demon do the same thing to him? Or a witch or something?
I would imagine there's some kind of demon who specifically sucks people's brains out or whatever. Couldn't he be like, hey, can you just aim for this chip?
Yeah.
What about just magic? Why couldn't he find someone magic and say, just magically dissolve this thing in my head so you don't even have to cut into it?
Yeah, exactly.
Come on, Spike.
I mean, there's not a whole lot more I feel like that they could do with Spike at this point if they're going to keep him kind of neutered like that.
Yeah, if he became a legitimate threat again, the possibilities would be much more expansive.
Agreed.
Is Drusilla still alive?
Yeah, she's out there somewhere.
Okay. Well, I feel like that's a great way to end this.
So what do you want to see more of next season, and what do you want to see less of?
I want to see more of the first Slayer actually being a threat and not repeating the Adam arc where, oh my gosh, this is the biggest threat we've ever faced. It's Thanksgiving again.
No, something better, like it's Earth Day. I have to go celebrate Earth Day.
Guys, it's Arbor Day. I just want to have one Arbor Day where we can plant trees in peace. And then maybe they could all turn into trees or something.
Yeah, there's a lot of potential there.
Yeah. See, Xander can make a bunch of jokes, and he could say, I got wood.
I was thinking something about the leaves falling and it being dandruff or something, but I don't know how to make that work. So they'll probably stick it in there.
That's why you're not a writer. Like me. I think I say this every season, but I would like to see less character idiocy. But we're already more than halfway through the entire show, and that has not happened. So I don't have high hopes.
Yeah.
If I had to be more specific, I would say characters revealing what they know in terms of critical information to other characters. But we've already seen in the last episode of this season, they didn't do that. So that's not going to happen either.
Yeah, just the characters behaving more rationally, I think, is kind of what you're getting at.
Yeah, and I get it, when they're in high school, high schoolers are dumb and they're not always going to do that. But the show keeps telling us that they're older and more mature now. But you got to prove it. Can't just tell us.
And who wants to watch a show where the protagonists that you're supposed to like are stupid and bad at their jobs in a way where that's not done purely for comedic purposes?
Right. So what do you want to see more of and less of in season 5?
I thought it was interesting that you brought up the first Slayer, because introducing that concept makes me remember again that we don't actually know anything about what being a Slayer means. We know what it entails, but where did this whole Slayer thing come from? If there's a first Slayer, are we going to get more information about that, about how Slayers are chosen, or where the whole Slayer thing started? I hope so. And that again kind of ties into the fact that we haven't had anything about the Watchers Council other than that brief appearance in the Faith episodes. So I think I still just want them to figure out the world better. Figure out something other than just having random things pop up in every episode. This could or could not be related, but this episode obviously didn't have a strong season arc and didn't have a strong kind of ending villain. So what I want to see is a strong threat that is actually interesting for them to fight and isn't just the same thing episode after episode, like it mostly has been in the show. It's always the Master throwing threats out of the shadows. It's always Angel just being Angel. It's always, we have to stop the mayor, but we're not actually doing anything about it. Or Adam is out there somewhere.
But we're not
again,
going to
we're
do
not
anything,
doing anything
about
about it. Yeah. So I hope they manage to make just the season arc work better. And I think having a more interesting villain that you can kind of fight along the way would make that work better. So that's what I want to see more of.
Yeah, I mean, you pointing out the past villains, their whole arc was they're working on their big plan. It would be much better if the plan was already thought out and they were actively doing the plan.
Yeah, if the characters were having to deal with it as it was unfolding,
Yeah.
instead of just kind of putting it all off to the end of the season.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Yeah. What I would want to see less of, I think, is basically the same thing that you were saying. It's just all the dumb, contrived problems that the characters have, which generally are of their own making. And especially when they're supposed to be dealing with all these other issues, and instead they focus on really stupid things that don't matter. But unfortunately, just from how the show has gone, I kind of doubt that they're really going to get away from that too much. But having as much humor as they have in some of these episodes really does help to offset that. And if they can kind of poke fun at themselves like they do sometimes, it does help a lot. Maybe that's a way that they can kind of balance it more, but I don't know. I mean, I think the characters just need to be written more intelligently in general.
Yeah.
I do want to say, I do think the fact that we ended on such an interesting episode that seems to set things up a lot, I hope that means that they have thought things out a little bit more in advance than they usually do, and that the next season is going to work a little better.
We'll see. So thanks for hanging with us all the way up through season 4.
And join us as we make our way into season 5.
How many seasons are there total?
7, if you don't count the comics.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
All right.